So, in conjunction with my last video, I want to do a follow up and just talking about their American exceptionalism and how you can say the country isn't great but still be a patriot. It got me thinking of something else that's been on my mind, and this is more focused, obviously, not as big picture as country, but this is more focused on the state of the left and the Democratic Party. Obviously, the right probably has their own reckoning and all that, but I'm nowhere near the right, so I can't give my opinion as much on that. But maybe some of my points probably apply to them too. I don't know. But with regards to what I was thinking was, as you've seen in my videos, can be very harshly critical of the Democratic Party and the left, the resistance, and other groups. And people can look at that and they can say, "Oh, why are you criticizing? We have to stop Trump. We have to, stop the Republicans. They control every arm of the government. Why are you criticizing?" And it's a fair point. I mean, I understand the logic, and you don't want to get too over the top. And particularly I know people sometimes don't like the criticism of people like Manchin and Heidecamp and Donnelly and these people who are centrist and who will sometimes, vote the center. And I'm going to be very clear here. I don't think some places can have hard left candidates necessarily. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. A good open primary system could help us figure that out. And I think that we should put up good primary candidates at every step of the way in all 50 states and every municipality and see what happens. But it may not work out that way. Some places are just tough. Some places may be more conservative. So that's fine. And I understand, too, that right now is kind of a tough time for Democrats. They got to regain their power, particularly in a place like the Senate, but also in a gerrymandered House. There may be times that you need to get some crossover voters, some more moderate seats. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the idea that just because a place is a swing district, that a moderate candidate will be the right one. But if they win in a primary, then you got to support them in the general. So, while my words are often very harsh, I should say every time that I have these situations that the Democratic candidate is still preferable to the Republican. But at the same time, I think it's critical to criticize. I think we have to, and criticism does not necessarily mean voting against. Don't stay home. Hell, I have to drive 2 hours back to Pennsylvania, 2 hours back tomorrow just to vote on Tuesday morning for my absentee ballot never came through for some odd reason. It's another issue, but I got to go up there and vote. So I would never say don't vote. That's up to each individual person. But I think we can't be unwilling to hear criticism. And I don't care if your name is Joe Manchin. I don't care if your name is Bernie Sanders. I'll criticize Bernie Sanders sometimes too, and the left, because sometimes, even though I agree much more with them, there may be situations where I don't think they go far enough. There may be situations that maybe they need to pump the brakes on it. So that's all well and good, but the worst thing you can do is not criticize. If a Joe Donnelly or a Joe Manchin want to support Gina Haspel, who's a war criminal, who should be a war criminal, who supports torture, they should be called out on it. They should be told that this is not a good vote. Okay, if they want to go against resolutions that say we shouldn't arm the Saudis for their war in Yemen, we should argue that, because that's not going to win them swing voters in Indiana and West Virginia. It's just not. So, I'm not saying that there has to be a purity test per se. I would personally like one. I would like to see them not taking corporate PAC money, supporting Medicare for all, supporting $15 an hour, all these different things I would want them to support. But you're not going to get that all the time. But when you look at the numbers, these guys are going 60% almost voting with Trump and the Republicans. So what is that? You don't see that with any single goddamn Republican. They don't do that because if they did that, they would be booted out. So there is an imbalance, and this is why the Republicans win. They have a sharp message, and they are, if someone breaks off, they criticize them and they push them hard. So we have to be the same way. And again, that's not to say come November, don't vote for Joe Donnelly. No, vote for Joe Donnelly because the guy he's going against is a Trump-loving business catering like right winger. So, of course, but at the same time, I sense too much. We see an issue of there's basically no tolerance for dissent. And that can't happen. Because when that happens, that's when you lose 1,000 House seats. Because you couldn't criticize. And I also understand that, it's a tough issue, particularly when you go to criticizing someone like Obama, who I like, and I think he did a lot of real good things, like the Iran deal. I also think he did some things I wasn't crazy about. I would have liked him to push harder on some things, but understand he was in a tough spot. And Republicans are, again, really ruthless. So I understand. And I understand criticizing Obama can also bring up a lot of other issues that I'm really not qualified to talk about at this point. So I understand you got to kind of tread gently, and the left has to keep that in mind, some of their criticism. But for something like some of the votes being taken right now, and to the extent they're being taken, 60%, you should at least be able to vote with the left position 50% of the time. I mean, that's got to be, that's a pretty low fucking bar. But you look at the numbers. The numbers bear it out. Republicans, even those supposed mavericks like Flake and McCain, that wasn't happening. They're going 80, 90%. And the media is portraying them as moderates. So I understand that you got to have a coalition, a big tent, but we have to keep this in mind. Because then once you start governing, are they going to start governing to the left? No. So I think so much we see leftward policies not invested in. Everything is shifted so far to the right. But you see in Kansas, draconian, reactionary, right-wing policies slashing education, giving that money to corporations to the point where some of these states like Kansas and Oklahoma are having 4-day school weeks. They're barely paying the teachers who got to work how many other jobs. Okay? So that's how it hit. But meanwhile, on the left, you don't see it. Even California can't get single payer because the Democrats, cut it off. The leading Democrats. In New York, don't. Now, I'm going to make one exception to my criticism and general election thing. I would advise New York Democrats never to vote for Andrew Cuomo again. Because that's a progressive left-wing state. And his behavior the last 8 years, it's garbage. It's treasonous. He should be kicked out of the Democratic Party. Because you can say about, he's now doing progressive things. He's being pushed to do progressive things. But he literally, he went in concert, in coordination with 8 elected Democrats, and them plus the Senate Republicans joined together. Maybe it's 7. I think one is in his own world. But 7 Democrats called the Independent Democratic Coalition. And they supported the Republicans and gave Republicans control of the Senate. Now, this state should be having many progressive policies. It should be a lab for progressive governance. And it wasn't able to be because Cuomo worked with these IDC, the renegade Democrats, and they would stop anything that would move forward. Now, recently, he cut a deal to, have them disassemble, give power back to Democrats. He's been pushed to do some progressive policies like $15 an hour, but he had to be pushed over 8 years. And he's only doing it now because he has a left-wing primary challenger. So Well, primaries are this one. The great thing about primaries, they can push the people in charge to make good decisions. We're seeing it in California. Dianne Feinstein, she's being pushed to make good decisions now. Suddenly, but at the same time, you got to wonder. After all these years, Cuomo had 8 years to do this. He didn't do it. I think he's got to go. Simple as that. Now, I don't vote in New York. It's up to New York to do what they got to do. But he had 8 years. Think of the great things you could do in New York. I'm from Pennsylvania. I mean, Republicans don't run the governorship, but they run the legislature. And the things have been stopped there because of that. New York could be trying all these things out, and we could find out if progressive governance works. From economic, from racial justice, I mean, environment, climate justice, all these different things. It's not happening. So I think Democrats need to be willing to criticize each other, willing to primary each other. I don't care if it's from the center or from the left. Let them primary, let them fight it out, because we will see some good things come out of that. It'll excite the base. It'll excite, people to get in and vote, and we can have a true, honest to God battle for ideas. Who's the best ideas win. And that would be the best thing. Get the money out of it all. Let's just see who, sell your idea. But the money has really diluted everything. So I think it would be a really helpful thing to see Cuomo go, get a good, true progressive in there, and let's see what happens. But Democrats as a whole, they got to be more open to criticism. They can't just not want criticism of the moderates or anybody like that. No, let's criticize and everything. At the end of the day, we vote for who we vote for, okay? But let's have these battles, and it'll sharpen the message, because Republicans have a ruthless message. They keep to it, and look at the success it's gotten them. They also fight at the local levels and all the way up. Now, part of that, they've just flooded it with money, but that's a separate issue. But look at their message. It's called the draconian rules that crush unions. They're now called right to work, and Democrats even call them that. Obamacare was a derogatory term. It was actually the Affordable Care Act. But my point is basically we gotta just message rather. We gotta be a lot tougher, and we gotta be not willing to bend. And moderates are great, and they have their point, they have their use. But as the Republican Party has moved so far over, the modern Republican Party is a radical right wing cabal of deplorables at the base. Now, there are some people who are economically challenged and there's anxiety. I get it. But, everything's moved so far to the right. I don't think there's much you can work with. There's much you can negotiate with these people. So we got to fight on our end, and maybe if you have two radicals fight, you get something in the middle. Then we can talk. But stop giving in and ending up all the way towards the right. I mean, even the Obamacare was a Republican healthcare plan. It was Mitt Romney's plan. It was the fucking Heritage Foundations, which, if you know about, is a right-wing think tank. So stand up for what you believe in. Fight hard. Have good, solid, honest primaries. May the best candidate win, and then fight a general on ideas. Because just being anti-Trump might get you power this time, but it's not going to be sustainable. You're going to be in the same spot in another 3 years. Until next time, later.